Hi guys, this is a game from Los Angeles Chess Club between me and the great Carlini. This guy has illusions of greatness, so he's famous in Los Angeles, and he's actually a pretty fun guy to play games or watch his games. He talks quite a bit, and if you have an experience, he really is really good, clean trash talk. So hope you enjoy this. I'm white in this game against him, and I'm playing an English opening, and he's responded with symmetrical moves like c4 and c5 by black. That makes it symmetrical English. So now knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6, and here we have what's called a four knights defense in English opening, in symmetrical English. And usually either white plays d4 or black plays d5 and take control of the center. Squares d4, d5 are very important. So here in this game I decided to start with d4. Takes, g6. So he's opting for a hypermodern setup. White may play g3 also, and we both fianchetto are king bishops. Black bishop g7 and white bishop g2 eventually. And the game takes a very lively course. The main thing to remember is that in English openings, white controls the light squares and black controls dark squares. That is the ultimate goal of each player. So let's see how the game continues. d4, d6, bishop e3, and bishop g7. Here, instead of bishop g7, he had a better move knight g4 to kind of harass this bishop, and I would have perhaps to give up. I probably would have played knight takes knight, but then he would have played knight takes bishop, and that would have been a good game for black. So as soon as he played bishop g7, I played h3 to make knight g4 impossible. So back to the real continuation. This move is a little bit unusual. You just don't move the queen out too early. Of course, he's got a cheap shot in mind to play knight takes e4 on this square, and I just have to watch out for. Best way to deal with it is to make a good developing move, and that explains my next move, queen d2. Castling, and I'm also need to get ready to castle. a3. This move also, I have some ideas. Number one, to prevent b4 square from his knight and queen, and in some variations maybe even play b4 and kick the queen back. It's a good flexible move for now. Bishop d7. This is a very cautionary move, and of course on knight takes c6 he has in mind to capture with the bishop on c6. So it's white to play knight b3. Knight b3, queen c7. So I kick the queen back, and I'm trying to provoke some weaknesses thanks to extra knight that I have on the queen side of the board. And that explains my next move, which is knight b5. Queen went all the way back to b8. This is probably the most flexible square for the queen to go to. And of course, I'm expecting a6 at any point, which is like a double-edged sword. On one hand, a7, a6, it kicks my knight from b5. On the other hand, it creates a weakness on b6. So let's see how the game continues. f3. My e4 pawn was hanging, so he didn't take it. So I retreat the knight back. And now it's just a matter of castling. Queen back to c7, rook c1, rook c8. And here, there's a very nice tactic by white in such positions. When you have your rook lined up in the same file as your opponent's queen, and there is an opponent knight in between, there's this maneuver of knight d5 is very nice one, and he cannot capture, because knight takes, pawn takes, and his knight would be pinned to the queen, and then they will lose the knight. So that explains this move. Here he realized that trading doesn't work for him, so he has to move the queen somewhere, which means white will control the weak b6 square. This square is extremely weak now in black's camp. So he moved the queen to d8, and I decided to massage the queen a little bit, kick him further back. That explains bishop b6 move. So pretty much the only move that he has now is queen e8. Obviously, rook on c7 would not work because of bishop takes or knight takes. So it's his move, and he played queen to e8. So I tried to test him to see if he was willing to give up a rook for a knight and give me an exchange. He decided not to and moved the queen back. So I tested him by moving the knight back to d5, and he pretty much has a queen e8. So where I wanted the draw, here I had it. But obviously, as a white, as high-rated player, as better-looking player, excuse my French, I'm playing for a win. So here, he said, I offer a draw, and I said, no, thank you, I like to play on. So now I avoided trading knights by moving the knight back, and his b6 square is extremely weak. As you see, he's a little bit cramped in this position, and he's trying to desperately find some squares for his pieces. With the last move, knight e5, he's hitting the c4 pawn twice with the rook and with the knight, and it's only guarded once with the bishop on f1. So here I have to find another way to defend that piece, and that explains my move, which is c5. c5 now is a nice move because it brings my knight on b3 to life, so I can capture with the knight or bishop. Both are perfectly playable, and I decided to take with the knight. So I'm threatening knight takes b7 here, and maybe knight takes bishop in some variations. And I also, by advancing my c4 to c5, I open my light square bishop diagonal. So as you see, white has a little bit of space advantage. He's trying to group his pieces in the game. And now knight d5 is a nice move, because if he ever takes, I'll take with a pawn, and then there'll be a lot of pieces on the queen side and center by white. Nice space advantage. So I played e6 to kick that knight, but now knight goes to b4 and trying to trade with that very well placed bishop on c6. The alternative is to go back to d7, which continues to have a cramped position. Queen e7. He's trying to get the queen off the back rank to bring possibly the rook to the game. And it's always a good idea to have the queen off the back rank. All your pieces pretty much except rooks. So it's white's turn now, and white should get ready to castle. Bishop e2. That explains my castling idea. So he's challenging my bishop and knight, and I trade one pair of knights. And of course, he captured the knight again to kick in my bishop. Now I brought the bishop to d4 and trying to trade it with his bishop on g7. Trading these bishops, trading your opponent's king fianchetto bishop almost always favors the other player, because black's best defensive piece is this bishop on g7, and you want to eventually trade it with your own dark square bishop. He played rook d8, nice move. He's about to uncork an attack, so this move forces him to do something. He played f6, which opened the diagonal of the king. Now he just moved the knight to f8, and with this move exposed my queen to his rook. But because of this a to g8 diagonal open, I don't have to move the queen immediately. First I throw in this check, and then I line up the queen and bishop on this nice diagonal. So as you can tell, white has clearly some space advantage here. One way to tell about space advantage is to see who has more pieces further up the board. Nobody has pieces on the other side of the board, but as you can tell, I have a knight on b4, bishop on c4, pawn on e4, pawn and two pieces on the fourth rank, and on his fourth rank, he only has a pawn. So white is definitely having a space advantage, but a space advantage is something that it's a temporary advantage. You got to take advantage of it immediately. So I'm a little bit behind in development, which explains my next move of castling. Okay, he did a good job with his light square bishop, opposing my light square bishop. That was a good plan on his part. So basically, you can compare the position of the bishops, white bishops versus black bishops. White is clearly more centralized, but at this point I had nothing better than trading light square bishops. So I traded bishops, took with the queen, and knight d5. This knight is beautifully unchallenged in the center. So not that there is any tangible targets for the moment, but there's a saying in chess, you put a knight in the center and you can go to sleep. It does all the work for you. So that's what I did. I'm about to take a nap. f5. This move is a nice counterattacking move by him, trying to open up and hoping to create some accident on the f file. So I'm going after his weak spots right now, hitting the rooks. If he moves the rook to the d7 or d6, then I win this rook. That means either he will have to trade rooks now or move the d rook to the e file immediately. Okay, he made the correct decision. Rook e8, and if you force your opponent to put his rook behind his own pawns, that's almost always a good idea. So I forced the rook off the nice open d file. This is a situation where neither side should trade rooks and improve their positions. Okay, the reason I trade rooks because now I want to control the d file. This d file is unchallenged, and I'm trying to take advantage of his back rank weakness. Okay, when your opponent pushes a pawn on the king side, usually it has two meanings. Either he has a very ambitious kingside attack, or he is trying to safeguard himself and basically not get made in the back rank. So after h5, I'm trying to figure out what are the options here, what are the best choices. I need to find a way to break through basically on the king side. So I played here to force him to make a decision with the pawns. After trading pawns, now the f file is open again, which means I have to bring the rook back. I should bring the rook back to the f file and try to create some accidents. So he's bringing the knight to the game. Knight on e6, having an eye on square d4 and f4. Knight d5 again. You saw this maneuver several times in this game. And here I'm going to augment that move with rook f1 and do something on the king side of the board, which is weakened because of the h5 pawn move that is pushed. And of course he's seeing all this is coming, trying to figure out what he should do. So he decided to move the knight to f4. Of course I can trade it, but I figured I pin it first and then if I decide to trade. So that explains my move, queen f3. That means he cannot trade right now. The knight is pinned to his queen. So here he played g5, h5. That weakens his king side a little bit more. And I decided to trade knights now, and I figured with every trade I should have some kind of a advantage. He took with a queen, and here I had a chance to win his h5 pawn with check, which would have been a good move, followed by, for example, queen g4, offer to trade queens, and hitting the rook on c8, and that would have won a clear pawn for me. But under time pressure, I believe I missed this, so instead I played another move, which was had a hard time finding a move here. Queen d3. Basically, I'm planning to play rook f1 next, and I didn't want to trade queens. When your opponent kingside is weaker than yours, keep all the pieces on the board, especially queens. So he's pointing out that I missed winning the h1, which is true. And now he force trades rooks by playing rook c1. So he's probably having an eye on perpetual check. You see, if I capture on c1 and he captures with a queen, and I play king h2, he has queen f4 check. Either I have to push the pawn or bring the queen. If I bring the queen back to g3, he's going to win the e4 pawn. So here I decided to take. He takes king here, and he picked up a pawn on b2. So at this point I had to remind him that it was my pawn, but he didn't care. So here, now I'm having an eye on his weak king side. First things first, I need to, if I want to do anything with the queen on his queen d8, for example, I gotta guard my a3 pawn. So here I did, and that threat is queen d8 check and picking up the g5 pawn. And his queen got a little bit away on this side of the board, and the action is on the king side. So it's not easy to bring his queen back right now. So I played queen c1 with the same idea, but now I'll play bishop e3 and prevent his queen from coming to the king side. And of course, my plan is queen d8 again. Now he's going to lose the g5 pawn. This is an example of a fork. So when I played bishop e3, I said fork you in a friendly manner. And of course, I pick up the g5 pawn, king h7. Now with the g5 pawn gone, I need to accentuate the pressure on its king side. First, I defended my bishop. Queen f3 was also perfectly playable. He's trying to repair, and I played queen f3. I'm hitting the h5 pawn, and of course he's defending this way, so I'm advancing position. He's retreating, and now we have a rule in chess called worst piece first. My king is my least active piece right now. I need to have some king marches towards the king side. Carlson, Caruana, these guys have some very nice games that they advance their kings and eventually won games. So here my bishops and queen are perfectly placed compared to his bishop and queen, but I need to improve the position of my king a little bit more. So that explains my next move. King h3, and my plan is to play g4 and advance with the king also. He has nothing but to maneuver his king back and forth, and there you go, g4 takes, king takes. Now my king is much better position than he was on h2 a few moves ago. Now the question is, what can I do with this good position? He's almost in Zugzwang. He just doesn't have any good moves at this point. So the position looks very good, but there's still a long way to go. With this move, he's hoping for some counter attack from behind, for example, with queen e2 check, from queen b5 coming to e2. So here, I conceived a nice plan of marching my king even further. There, king h5. Now queen e2 fails to king g6. If queen e2 check, king g6, and he's on the brink of resignation. The position is pretty much winning at this point. So he saw that. He didn't want this to happen, of course, and he brought the queen back to e8. Okay, queen g6 exclam. With this move, obviously he cannot afford to trade, because the queen takes g6, king takes g6, it's just a matter of time for white to advance his h pawn and even force win this pawn on e5 if I want to. So this is definitely a winning position. So he decided not to trade. Okay, at this point I realized that I have a huge time advantage, and I could have just given a couple of spot checks and win the game on time, which is pretty much what I did. So I even reminded him that he was low on time. I played queen f5, he repeated the position, I brought the king back. These are basically game timing moves. And there, 43 seconds advantage. It's not easy to beat great Carlini. His blitz is solid master level. Hope you had a pleasure. You will have a pleasure of beating him someday. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it.